But as I said, I mean, I veered off into folklore, and one of the things that I came across, actually before I went into folklore itself, in an anthropology class in the City College of New York, were prior cultural uses of apparently similar techniques. In other words, randomness. And I guess this is where we have to turn on the slides here. Let's see. Okay. These techniques in the past they've been called divination. And divination is one of those words, well, what? It comes from the divine. It comes from this need to connect to something that you can't know. To something, I'm pointing above, I'm pointing to the cosmos, to the gods. But in any event, humans can't figure it out. Oh. Totally unknowable. What we cannot know, we have to ask the gods. And there are all kinds of ways of doing that. And I mean, this is one of the most famous places that happened. This is the temple of Apollo, but it's at Delphi in Greece. And actually, on the phone this morning, Saul described the two of us as one being Apollonian and one being Dionysian. And yet, and yet, I mean, this is very bizarre because this is a temple to Apollo, and yet there was an oracle located in the basement, literally underneath that structure. And anciently, and it's fairly recently been proven that they built this temple over a fault. And there were fissures in the rock, there were cracks in the rock, out of which noxious fumes arose. And she was totally stoned. I mean, the oracle sat over these poisonous fumes and just got completely loco and would just totally babble gibberish. And there's somebody else there interpreting it. This random stream of syllables, someone would somehow translate into a sentence. Oh, don't attack Persia, because Persia will, something like that. So, and they based all kinds of other things, based attacking Persia on what the Oracle of Delphi said. So there's always been this combination. There's always been this bizarre combination of, Apollonian structure and order and rigor and so forth with accessing the other, accessing the something else through these weird techniques. And I think, so there's actually the altar, that they did this in front of it at Delphi itself. The oldest way of doing this, can we turn off these lights maybe so people can actually see the pictures? Well, darkness is good. Saul was in the light, I'm in the shadows. And that doesn't look focused to me either, quite. In any event, this is early Chinese. There we go. Divination, where they are asking questions in very, very early fluctuating characters on the back of a tortoise shell. And then they put the tortoise shell over the fire, they get these crackles from just burning it. They get these crackle patterns on it, and then they interpret those patterns. And that will, that'll tell you your answer. Out of this system came the I Ching. I mean, centuries and centuries along. And the I Ching is one of the, we toss the yarrow sticks, we come up with a series of combinations. That tells us, a page to go look at in a certain book, the Tao Te Ching, the way of the clouds, basically, the way of divination. And There are hundreds of pages in this book, hundreds of pages to choose from. Tossing these coins, tossing these yarrow sticks helps you pick out a certain page, and you read that page with whatever question you have in mind. You know, will I find a girlfriend? Just something, just anything at all, any kind of question at all. And what's on that page, I mean, I could pick up a random page out of this book and read, that random page, and there would be something in there that would make you think of something you hadn't thought of before. It actually wouldn't be all that impossible out of this book, because this is a book that we both studied from, and it probably something relevant would be in there. But the I Ching, it's so amazingly written that any page in there, something on that page, it's open enough, it will remind you of something you hadn't been thinking about. You will see a connection. You will, to whatever question you have, whatever unsolved problem you have that you're asking the gods about, you will find something in the I Ching that will help. You will come up with new insights that you hadn't thought of before. If you were limited to your own possibly rational thinking, possibly Apollonian thinking, you'll get stuck. But if you open yourself up to something else, a random page out of the I Ching, then, you will find something you hadn't thought of. And some of those things will actually be helpful. And some of them are totally misleading, absolutely, but you ignore those. So, all of these divination systems use randomness in their process somewhere. We're looking at astrology, and the stars are about as random a pattern as you can find, and yet, by picking out, this clump of stars to meditate on in the meetings, Capricorn or whatever, you will break on through to the other side, to quote the Doors, who were also quoting Suckley, who was quoting, etc. But it works. It literally does work, and that's the amazing thing. There are some random patterns there, astrological charts of the various planets, and of course the planets are completely scrambled at any one given moment, and so it goes. There's a Islamic, tweet, yes, if you would, there's this gorgeous Islamic version of the cosmos and the astrological complexities of the stars. And yes, you will find something useful in there. Tarot cards. Tarot cards are another one of these divination systems in the Western world, probably coming from Persia originally, with all kinds of bizarre images. You've got to shuffle those cards before you lay them out and then interpret. Oh my God, Dad, that doesn't look good. Apropos whatever your question is. And our surrealists, I actually thought this all was going to be using surrealists and Dadaists, in images thereof. But so there's a tarot card as designed by Salvador Dali of the Hanged Man, who is smiling, by the way. The Hanged Man this is not necessarily bad. This is good. The Hanged Man is smiling. So, all of this is in preface to my favorite example, which is from the Naskapi Indians of northern Canada. They use scapulomancy. Here actually is a Chinese example of a scapula is the bone, your shoulder blade bone. And the Naskapi Indians of northern Canada use this very similar technique as well. So this is where we have to turn on. The other, is the other one? Oh, wait, and forward. Yeah, okay, so I didn't have a picture of a scapula, so I made my own. So there's my, there's my scapula. What the Nascapi do, okay, the Nascapi are way up there in the north, almost to the tree line, and what they're looking for are elk. And I mean, you know, this is their main source of food, and they, you know, absolutely require the elk. The problem is that the elk could be anywhere, and if they've seen any evidence whatsoever that the elk were, you know, off over here yesterday, or a scat on the ground or something, they don't use scapulomancy, they go and find the elk. If there's evidence for where the elk are, they go and get them. But if they don't know where the elk are, then they use scapulomancy. They take the scapula, not of one of themselves, but of the elk, and they, I think this one, put it over the fire, and it cracks. And they orient the blade of the scapula to the north, and they read that system of cracks as a map. Ah, okay. There's our route, they're over here. And so they go and they get them. Now, you would think, I mean, you know, it's just a bunch of cracks. It's, you know, I mean, it's not telling them where the damn elk are. But in fact it does. Because, well, the elk could be anywhere. There is as good a chance in any direction as any other. But people, being people, would probably fall into patterns, fall into habits. Were they not using some technique to prevent habits? Were they not inserting randomness into their choices, they would fall into patterns. Well, the other thing is that they would squabble. They would squabble for hours. Ah, we should go this way. Oh, no, let's go later. So using the scapulomancy, for one thing, it makes the decision quickly. They all agree, okay, we'll go that way. And sure enough, the elk are over there somewhere. But the measurable thing, and this is from a paper an American anthropologist back in the 60s, I guess. Actually, yeah, I bet you it was just about the same time that Kate was doing that stuff, actually. When somebody named Omar Khayyam Moore published this article, and what he found was that the elk are canny. The elk are really smart. And if the humans, in their laziness, had fallen into patterns, had fallen into habits, the elk could figure this out and avoid them. You know, if they always went in the same direction every 3 days, the elk would not be there. But because they're randomizing themselves, it does measurably, scientifically, provably increase their chances of finding the elk. So it does actually work. I mean, it does. I mean, here I'm giving you a scientific Apollonian proof that irrationality is a process that you know, it's a useful process. And this actually does, let's see which one, bring me to my next little diagram. And then you've got to catch a gander at that one. Do you recognize this all? It's a scratched out version of page 36.
How do you make these slides, Charlie?
Paint them black and you take your fingernail and you scratch them. Or just, you know, something, anything sharp, you scratch them. Page 36 of Anton Ehrensweig's book. And I just found out moments ago that Saul studied with this guy, one of my heroes, Richard Foreman, the guy that I performed with for several years.
I studied with Richard, but Richard studied at Yale. Everybody I studied with studied at Yale, studied with Ehrensweig.
Yeah, there's a direct academic pedigree, you know, to this guy Ehrensweig through both of us. And
I learned it from Richard Serra.
You learned it from Richard Serra, okay. Let's see, which one do I want next? Ah, no, not that one. Get it. I've gotten backwards. And it's not what it's Actually, I'm trying to go forward. This is going backwards. Why is it not? Okay, we're trying to go forward. Ah! There it is. You can turn off the other one if you would. Thanks. There's the diagram from Anton Ehrenzweig, The Hidden Order in Art. And this is basically a psychology of creativity. His question is, how does anybody, an artist, a scientist, come up with something new? Something which has not been there before. No one has thought this before. And yet it makes sense. And his diagram, which has always been one of my favorite diagrams, as you see, it's a mess. It's a total scramble. You know, you go off in these vectors in all kinds of directions, and eventually some of them will intersect, and some of those intersections, like some of those pages in the I Ching, will be useful, will make some sense. They will be a connection that no one had thought of before. So there's a direct connection between these ancient techniques of divination and lots of techniques that artists use, and certainly the surrealists and Dadaists and John Cage and the surrealists were very, Andre Breton spoke of his activities sometimes as divination. He used the word himself. So it's all, we're not making this up, it's all solid. One of the things that Ehrenzweig says is that what you've got to do is de-differentiate. This is the word that he uses, de-differentiate. And that's a psychological term for, basically, in some sense, achieving the dream state while you're awake. In other words, combining rational consciousness and all those intuitive blah, 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 all those other kinds of consciousness. Achieving the dream state while you're awake. De-differentiation, in a dream, a pencil can be 10 feet tall. And it's still a pencil, and it still works, and there's no problem. There is no difference in a dream. We don't differentiate between, something that size and something that size. It can all make fluid sense. It can make organic sense. It can make real sense in a dream. When we're awake, no, there's a big difference. So we have to let go of that sense of separation, that whole scientific process of separating things into their separate categories. We have to allow de-differentiation, but while we're awake and we can notice it. And one of the techniques that I saw Foreman doing this, once in a while I would help him out building the sets and so forth, and he would take a cat nap and go to sleep in the bleachers in front of the set. And then wake up, and right when you're completely bleary-eyed, look at your art then. Look at your art when you're in that between state, where your eyes are open and you're seeing this world, but you're still using that other kind of mind. And in those moments, you may see completely different things. You may see relationships, you may see background, foreground, may reverse, all kinds of things can happen. And it works out.
I have a question for both of you. Give me that.
I just have one other little example.
Oh, sure. Okay.
I just want to say that I found myself using this technique in a different kind of way when I traveled in India. When I lived in New York, I could, if there was some work of art that I saw somewhere that I wanted to buy, I could wait for months and go back and look at it again and again and again, and really be sure that I wanted that one. In India, I was never going to be there again. I had to decide right away. In India, buying something is a social process. They bring out tea, they chat, they go on and on and on. And at some point, the dealer would take the work that you were talking about and he would put it over there to the side. And eventually he would tell his little helper, okay, go, he's not gonna buy it, go put it away in the back room. I always said, no, leave it there. Over there at the edge. I'm talking to this guy. We're talking about, I don't know, travels in Ladakh or something. And every once in a while, just out of the corner of my eye, I would catch this piece of art that I was thinking about. And I would notice what my stomach did. Not what my conscious mind did, but what my stomach did when I caught it out of the corner of my eye. If I liked it then, I was pretty sure that I would keep liking it for a long time. If I went, then no, I didn't buy it.